Hey guys, welcome back to the ocean. It's Theory Chum here, and it's been a long time coming. It's the theory everyone's been waiting for, but nobody really wanted. Operation Fastgate. Today in this theory, we're going to go ahead and go over the things that I put in the Chum dossier, which is going to be down in the description. I'm going to link it, and you're going to be able to read along and see the images, not only on the screen in the video, but in the document as well. Now, for this theory, I'm going to be having to get you some heavy-hitting evidence, right? We're going to be swimming around with some pretty hefty sharks. So let's go ahead and go into how I'm going to show you, what I'm going to show you, and where we're going to end up by the end of this video. What I'm going to show you today is Operation Gateway. Operation Gateway was a parapsychology experiment that the CIA did back in the early 70s. The first document that was released on this after the Freedom of Information Act passed the first time was written and released in 1983 by this lieutenant colonel. I believe that the Operation Gateway and the science team that worked with the CIA during this is the entire basis for Five Nights at Freddy's. Much like as you see in the movies, based on true events, loosely based on a real story, Forrest Gump. I believe this experiment is the inspiration for FNAF. I'm going to be bringing up a bunch of different evidences today. These evidences are going to include the Fazbear Frights books, Ultimate Custom Night, FNAF 4, FNAF World, and a whole slew of other things. And we're going to get into it. I'm going to show you step by step, one to one, that this is the basis for Five Nights at Freddy's. You guys just go ahead and buckle on up and swim with your sharks, because we're going to keep getting deeper today, deeper than the Mariana Trench. I'd like to start this theory off by making a point of the location. As we all know, Hurricane, Utah is a pretty significant place of importance in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. It's the place where the Silver Eyes trilogy takes place. It's the place around Security Breach, as we see from the Security Breach new guide coming out this December, having the Hurricane Utah zip code. Now, why is this important? Now, if we take a look at the potential FNAF 2 military script, we actually get a line from General Everly, where he speaks about vortices and quantum wave functions. Now, vortices is a word with multiple meanings. It could mean like a vortex on a graph to change direction. It could also be a vortex or a swirl of something. And whenever we're looking at that, we can take the quantum wave mechanic, which is a formula, a mathematical formula used to describe some kind of form of energy, whether it's about its spin, its life, its location, and it tells us about that energy. Since we have both vortices and quantum wave function, we know that the vortices that's being spoken of is the vortex swirl. It's an energy vortex. And right outside of Hurricane Utah, there is an energy vortex called the Bull. Now, what is an energy vortex? An energy vortex is a place of guided spiritual and emotional energy. Just like agony, which is throughout all of FNAF, is based off of the emotions in one's spirit. And Hurricane Utah isn't even the only location that's around the Bull that we get told about. While watching TD Reads on one of his recent live streams going through Security Breach, he finds spray paint on the wall that talks about Cedar City. Cedar City is also a city in Utah that is around the Bull. But not only did the CIA do experiments around them back in the day, Cedar City is the one place in Utah where they still do remote viewing experiments. And don't worry if you don't know what remote viewing is right now. I'm about to get into that in just a moment, and I'm going to thoroughly define it, because it's going to be a very, very, very big point of this theory.
The next topic to touch into here is going to be the Mind Science Foundation. The Mind Science Foundation is a real-life group of scientists who have worked with the CIA researching parapsychological and psychological studies. One of these studies is working on Operation Gateway. The three that led the Mind Science Foundation are William Broad, Marilyn Schlitz, and Helmut Schmidt. These three parapsychologists are either named or have their researches and studies and their experiments done throughout the games as well. The first one we're going to look at is going to be William Broad. William Broad is actually spoke about in the 1:35 a.m. epilogue. Phineas Taggart, a parapsychologist in the books who has studied agony for a very long time, talks about a stare experiment that one of his colleagues did in an attempt to measure EDA. This experiment in itself is actually a CIA experiment. It is William Broad working with the Mind Science Foundation, working in tune with the CIA. And as part of this experiment, the same as Taggart goes on to continue, he says, it shows the effects of the sympathetic nervous system. This exact CIA experiment had an appendix which had a file that was about how the brain can heal energies. Now, if we go back a couple minutes ago, you're going to remember that I brought up remote viewing. Let's go ahead and talk about what remote viewing is. Remote viewing is kind of like a psychic phenomenon where people could visualize, see, or find another person or object by connecting their consciousness. It's a lot like how you would have cold psychics saying they could find people who have been missing or lost. These were really, really big in the 90s. You used to see them all the time on this show called The Montel Show. It was a really big deal back then. And William Broad is the parapsychologist who actually brought it to the Western Hemisphere. He pioneered it completely. And his experiment, and this is going to be very specific to FNAF, was to watch and observe and try to affect a subject's electrodermal activity from another room by watching them through a camera and then studying these effects. We actually see this in a few places. We see remote viewing take place with Torture Freddy, which we're going to get back into Torture Freddy in just a minute. We see remote viewing take place in things like Help Wanted, the security offices, Security Breach, the FNAF movie. It's everywhere. There's also another thing that William Broad researched, and this is going to be the Gonsfeld effect. Now, if you've ever watched Marvel or heard of Marvel, I'm sure you've heard of the show or comic Daredevil. This was also a big movie back in the early 2000s with Ben Affleck. That's how I usually connect with Daredevil myself. The premise of Daredevil is that within losing his sight, his other sensories actually boosted. They increased and got more honed because he wasn't using his sight. This is almost directly like the Gonsfeld effect. The Gonsfeld effect was made to block sensories so that a human's emotions and thoughts would only be directed inward with no outside sensory interference. And what this would prime the emotions and the psychological state of the subject doing it. And Torture Freddy is a prime example of this. You have the saws in the face, you have a speaker in the ear, you have actual Delco goggles, which are the red filter goggles, which are specifically used for Gonsfeld effects, on his eyes. This is an experiment of William Broad. But we talked a lot about William Broad, and we still have two other parapsychologists to discuss. Let's go ahead and move on to a short one to go over. Marilyn Schlitz. Marilyn Schlitz is also listed in the experiment that Taggart talked about, where Broad was trying to measure EDA. She was one of the experimenters who worked figuring out how the brain psychology and biopsychokinesis could heal. And what they found is that while they couldn't heal themselves, it was possible and had a higher effect on someone else's blood cells. So this is why in FNAF, it's like, if you ever thought about it, if agony heals, why doesn't anyone heal themselves anytime they make agony? That's going to be because, just like this experiment says, your agony affects other people. You can't affect your own blood, your own red blood cells as much as you could affect someone else's. Now, Marilyn Schlitz also did a stress experiment.
Hello and welcome. Our topic today is biological psychokinesis, or the ability of the human mind to directly influence living biological tissue without the mediation of any known muscular or other mechanical means. sometimes associated, of course, with psychic healing. My guest today is Marilyn Schlitz, an anthropologist and parapsychology researcher at the Mind Science Foundation of San Antonio, Texas. Welcome, Marilyn.
Thank you.
You've been very active in psychokinesis research on biological tissues. You've published and written dozens of papers in this area. I think it might be useful to begin with to describe to our viewers how research of this type is conducted, because I know it's very controversial, and I think it's important to impress upon people the care with which you actually do these studies.
Well, I think that the biological psychokinesis work has taken a number of different directions in terms of methodology. Our own work at Mind Science Foundation was initiated by Dr. William Broad at Mind Science. He's a psychologist, an experimental psychologist. And we have worked with a number of different biological systems. We've worked with animals, we've worked with human blood cells. The most abundant topic that we've worked with is the idea of one person influencing another person's physiology without any kind of sensory interaction whatsoever.
You mean like their galvanic skin response or their heartbeat?
Exactly. We're taking various parameters of autonomic nervous system activity, i.e. that part of the nervous system that doesn't require conscious control, and then asking a person. Basically, we bring a person into the laboratory, we sit them down in a comfortable chair, and we monitor some parameter of autonomic activity. Galvanic skin response is the most common form of measurement that we've employed. And what we do basically is we put electrodes on the palms of a person's hand, and this then sends an electrical impulse to a chart recorder and a computer in another room.
It's the same kind of a response that would be measured in a lie detection test.
Exactly.
So, and it's a measure of a person's nervous activity or sometimes a sweat gland activity in the skin.
That's exactly right. And essentially what we're doing then is asking another person, maybe a healer, maybe just an average person, to come in and influence the distant person's autonomic activity. Okay? So that essentially what we're doing is taking, say, a half-hour period and dividing it up into small sampling epochs. And what we ask the person to do, the healer, is to, at random times throughout the session, either calm or activate the distant person's autonomic activity.
And how distant is the distant person?
Well, we've not manipulated distance to any great degree. Typically we're about 40 yards, something.
In separate rooms?
In separate rooms, separated by several rooms, actually, so that there is no possibility of a sensory interaction between them. Oftentimes the subject, the volunteer who's having their autonomic activity monitored, is in a soundproof room, so that there's no possibility of any kind of sensory information.
The critics would obviously look for this immediately. They'd say, well, there's some kind of cueing going on, that the person knows how to relax themselves or knows how to tense themselves, and they know when the other person is trying to do it, and that's how an artifact would occur. And
that's a very, very good criticism if it were relevant to this particular area of research. In this case, the design that we're using totally precludes any possibility of autonomic self-control as being an explanation for the kind of results we're getting. What we're doing is we're, as I said, dividing up the sampling period. And this, then, there are periods where the healer is trying to influence the autonomic activity, and there are other periods where he's doing nothing but just relaxing and what we call control conditions. So that for any one experimental period, what we're able to do is compare the amount of autonomic nervous system activity during influence periods with those periods when there's no attempt to influence the
in other words,
activity.
you're asking the healer to arouse the autonomic nervous system.
In some cases, for the majority of experiments that we've done, we've asked the healer to calm the distant activity.
Which would be more of a healing
exactly.
response. Yeah.
We did one experiment where we looked at a group of needy people, people who had an exceptionally active autonomic nervous system. And we compared these people with a group of people whose autonomic activity rested in the normal range. And our idea was that if this biological psychokinesis paradigm is relevant to healing, then perhaps those people who had the greatest need to be healed would be more readily influenced.
This experiment was to take somebody who was already highly susceptible to feelings of loneliness and isolation, make them feel more isolated and lonely, and then introduce a shaman-like figure to come calm them down. And while they were being calmed down, they would measure the EDA of the subject, the electrodermal activity, to see how the emotions and energy were being changed in that moment of calming. We see this reflected almost every single night in the FNAF 4 minigames. The crying child is pushed to his limits. The Fredbear plush is telling him, go out there, do more, don't be scared. If you stop and turn back now, he's gonna get you. It's reassuring the crying child to push himself, and then every time the crying child crashes out and starts to fall down, the Fredbear plush reassures him. We are still your friends. We're here for you. Do you believe this? What is happening here is the crying child is being primed by the Fredbear plush, and we're going to talk about what that is at the end of this video. However, this experiment in FNAF 4, they are one-to-one with each other, except it's just FNAFified in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe and story. Now that we've talked about those two parapsychologists, let's talk about the third one. This third one is going to be Helmut Schmidt. That's right, Schmidt. Like Mr. Schmidt from Monster, Mike Schmidt from the movie, Mike Schmidt from the games. And now we get to look into his showings in the book. The first thing we're going to look at is Fetch, where Greg studies REG and the 0-point field. Yes, there is another CIA employee who is named in this book. His name is Clive Baxter, and he did experiments with the 0-point field as well. However, Helmut Schmidt did researches and experiments with random event generators and the 0-point field. And there's yet another place that links to him too. We're going to go back to the FNAF 2 potential military script, and we're going to go down to where he talks about observing the unobservable energies. This is a nod to the observer effect. This effect is something else that William Schmidt studied. And there we have the big three of the Mind Science Foundation. The Mind Science Foundation, as I said before, worked with the CIA, and they worked as well on Operation Gateway. Not only did the Mind Science Foundation work on Operation Gateway, they also worked on a lot of the experiments that were happening around the bowl around in Utah. These experiments were much along the lines of MK Ultra and other secret things that were covert back in the 70s and 80s, before Bill Clinton modified the Freedom of Information Act, which made these things more publicly available. And now you may ask, how do we know that these three parapsychologists did this work for Operation Gateway? Because it's titled under Robert Monroe, who is the man who led that experiment. Much like in the other experiment, it was led by Hubbard. This brings back up remote viewing again, and one of the reasons why remote viewing is important to this theory and understanding. Because remember, William Broad pioneered remote viewing in the Western Hemisphere. William Broad worked with the CIA. The CIA did work with remote viewing techniques, and one of the experiments that they worked with remote viewing techniques was Operation Gateway. So you can follow the clear line going down the path that's being set for us and is all connected here. Now it's time to start unpacking Operation Gateway. And we're going to go through this in the same order as the intermediate workbook and as well the Gateway Project experiment itself. The first thing we're going to look at is the beginning stage, and that's going to be Focus 10. To be able to understand what Focus 10 really is, we have to go ahead and understand how the experimenters get to the Focus 10 state. What they would do is they would lie them down, and they would have these people blank everything out, and they would just listen to audio sounds, such as static, which is an important thing to know, waves rolling through water, which is an important thing to know, and wind rustling through trees. And if you didn't guess what I was going to say by now, it's an important thing to know. This would bring the brain to a state of deep relaxation, one where one could focus and concentrate more through their memories, and they actually feel like a higher level of energy. So let's go ahead and look at all of these examples. The first one's going to be static. Static is also known as white noise, and it's a combination of all frequencies, typically between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. This usually has the effect on the brain to make it more focused, more stable. It also has showing to make slower brain waves come out, like the theta ones, which is better for deep relaxation. So static itself, which is one of the reasons they're using it in this experiment, does have an effect on the brain to help it reach a deeper relaxation state. Let's go ahead and see where we see static. Well, this is actually going to be in Secret of the Mimic.
Levels are good. This is where I heard it. It's her or someone that sounds like her. Set frequency to 4625. Hello? Hello? Is anyone there? Over. Say something. It's me, Edwin. Over.
Whenever Edwin finds Fiona on the 4625 frequency, he's done it after being up there obsessively listening through static sound. That static is imprinting on his brain. And while it's imprinting on his brain, his memories are being released through that. I believe that's why whenever he hears Fiona talking, it's actually the thing he regrets, like not being there and going to David's party and still working. That's why he hears that moment from the birthday tape in this instance. It's not actually Fiona, it's his regret in that moment. Now that's a bit to unpack and part of a bigger theory for another day. For this, we're going to go and direct back to Operation Gateway. The next is going to be the rolling water sounds. In Dinophobia, whenever Rory was going to bed and he was having these nightmares, he would hear what he thought was a shower running. He thought that his mom was in the shower taking a shower, but what it actually turned out to be was just a speaker playing running water. This would put Rory into the deep relaxation state again, where he would see the nightmares and stuff. The next part of this, we're going to look at the movies for the wind rustling through the trees. Whenever Mike Schmidt would sit there and try to get his brain to a state where he could focus and remember things from his past so he can try to remember Garrett, he listens through wind rustling through trees, and this gets him to a state of deep relaxation where he can go back and see this memory. We're seeing all of this audio stuff that they use to prepare the brain, preparing 3 different people's brains throughout the series. It's actually going to be 4, and the 4th one's going to be the Fredbear plush, but we're not going to talk about that yet because that's going to happen in the Talbert Files version of God, David, and that's going to happen at the end of this video, so make sure you stay tuned. Do you feel like you're the coolest of cool? If you do, chances are you're already wearing the TD Reed's God boot. Let me just show you this beautiful piece of art. Special sound effects. Look at this. Great print. It fits nice. It makes me look better, right? Like, normally I'm out here looking like a butterball turkey. This man caught me looking like Stone Cold Steve Austin back in the 90s, okay? I feel like 40-year-old mothers are about to start having crushes on me simply because I already have this shit off. Calm down, ladies. I'm already married. I'm already taken. You're just going to have to slow down. You guys need to make sure that you go ahead and hit up this TD Reed's merch because it's not often that you find comfortable, stylish, and nap wear all at the same time. And it's really cool to help such a great creator. Big shout out to him growing up, right? Link's going to be in the description. Absolutely not sponsored. I'm just a really big fan. So, the next thing we're going to go ahead and talk about here, we're going to go talk more about Focus 10. As I was saying before, Focus 10 is that state of deep relaxation. And in this deep relaxation, the more that one was to practice it and harness it, the more they would be able to control themselves and realize this until they're having an out-of-body experience. And this is actually something that we get from the FNAF movie again, whenever Mike Schmidt is talking to Jeremy about the dreams and how he does it. Mike has done this so many times. He's aware and he can talk and interact and see things, even to the point where he remembers his dreams that he knows whenever he goes into it later on in the first movie that it's not the same as the first time. That is a lucid state. That is a state of awareness. And what happens whenever you perfect this state of awareness is whenever you enter Focus 12. Focus 12 is yet another higher state of energy where one is fully aware, and they're also able to travel within systems. They're able to send their energy from one electronic to another. We see that with the clowns in Mangle and the Silver Eyes. We see it with the Fast Talker as the kids are able to talk to Abby, or whoever is able to talk to Abby through the Fast Talker. And we actually see this in Lonely Freddy. And we're going to go ahead and take a moment to break down Focus 12 by taking a step away to the intermediate workbook. This workbook was made alongside Operation Gateway by the CIA, and it gives us details into how they achieved and worked these states. I'm going to go ahead and take a special notion to mention two things that are in FNAF World. The first one is going to be the clock orientation. In the clock's ending, you go around and you're specifically told by Glitch Bear to follow the clocks. It's guiding your consciousness going through Cece's brain. And what do we notice about the time on all of the clocks in FNAF? They're all different times on the clock. And whenever you're guiding your consciousness through the clock orientation, you guide yourself by following the hour and minute hand of a clock, visualizing one around you. This is the same thing we're being shown in FNAF. There's also another moment in FNAF World where we get something referred to as a reball. What this is a resonant energy balloon. This is one's consciousness, one's pure energy taking shape as part of the body. And what they do is for different systems of the body, they show up as different colors. And these different colors are all shown as balloons or bubbles. We see this in the pinwheel circus. Whenever we see these little balls of light that are all different colors, these are resonant energy balloons. These are reballs. So what does this have to do with Lonely Freddy, like I mentioned before? These reballs showing the energy of consciousness inside of Cece's brain actually goes to show us that we're working with a living body map. And it's a beam of light that is, again, for different systems, it grows different colors of a prism that you can actually take out and manipulate, and you can stretch your energy out. They believe that you could stretch it out to touch your own energy, your own living body map, and be able to heal places with, sufficiently enough, purple healing energy. Just like how Afton turned purple after being spring-locked and he got healed. Just like Mike turned purple after he got scooped and got remnant injected into him and he got. You could also transfer your consciousness across this living body map. And that's exactly what Lonely Freddy did. He locked eyes with Alec, and then through this beam of light, the living body map beam, he transferred his consciousness. And then Alec was stuck in the Lonely Freddy. Make sure you put a pin in that note because it's going to be important later. Since we went over a few examples of Focus 12, we're not going to dive into Focus 15. Focus 15 is yet another higher level of energy, where this one actually starts breaking dimensional boundaries. The fourth dimension of time no longer affects this energy, which means that anything that has happened, this energy experiences immediately, whether it's the past, the present, the future, all because it's not experiencing linear time. This is things like Return to the Pit, Into the Pit, Ultimate Custom Night. All of these examples are showings of Focus 15. And then there's also, whenever TD Reeds was going over the FNAF movie trailer, everyone was trying to get Scott Cawthon to say 14. And they tried to say that, like, Scott was just trolling everybody, but he said 15, and I'm pretty sure that was him correcting everyone, because he's trying to say Focus 15. And since we've got Focus 10, 12, and 15 out of the way, do you want to know how they, like, abbreviated these titles? They just used F in the number. That's right, your favorite Fiona F10 and 4. F10 is also a showing for deep relaxation. It's Focus 10. And yes, while there's two showings that could reflect this, I will admit that these last two pieces of evidence are highly speculative at best. Going even further beyond, we're going to go over to Focus 21. And here's where they break the dimensional boundaries. They are now trans-dimensional, and they're able to go across different dimensions. We even get these inside of the series. We have Chipper coming from the Lumbersons Co. We have Anim Dude, Scott Cawthon coming into FNAF World. We have Garrett's plane being seen in both FNAF World and Mega Cat's Into the Pit game. These are all trans-dimensional representations. If you've made it this far and you like what you've seen, thank you so much. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Before we get to the Talbert files of God David, I'm going to make some honorable mentions here that's going to make more sense at the very end of the video. There's more CIA and military shoutouts, like in Fetch, Greg talks about he doesn't understand why he thought he would be smarter than the CIA, the experts, the universities, the people who tried to get this done. In Return to the Pit, there's a character named Ava who is specifically pointed out to be someone from the military. They obviously had some kind of knowledge on this and information going in. They've also worked with the leader. Not to mention the multi-stage underground bunker with blueprints and other terrifying experiments down there being hidden from public eye. It's not something you just normally find under a pizzeria. It's not just William Afton down there. Of course, again, there's the FNAF 2 military script where they say that where the guy says FNAF is not just a pizzeria, and like they're being backed by the government. And all of this leads to David the Talbert file. To be clear, I'm not going to be as much as a tool as the first Talbert file. This is an unofficial version. This is not something I worked on with TD Reeds. Like I said before, I'm just a big fan of his. It is my intake on it from what I've seen and how it just lines up so perfectly with the things I've already known from the CIA experiment. And I'm going to use it to try to explain and show not only why God David is true, but the process and how it's attempted. If you're not familiar, just to go over, there's a lot of similarities between the crying child Gregory and David Murray. So what's being believed here is that Fiona is trying to bring David back by inserting him into children's minds, like the crying child and Gregory's. So for this, we're going to go ahead and look back at the Marilyn Schlitz experiment. The Fredbear Plus, as the shaman that's meaning to calm the crying child down, is there doing it. And how do they calm the crying child down to where he lays down and cries himself to sleep? They do it by talking to him. He's getting these audio noises. If we look in the sister location bunker, we can see where these audio noises are coming. The Fredbear plush has a receiver. That receiver has a very, very, very particular antenna at the top. I went over antenna theory before. It was pretty close to being correct, but it wasn't completely correct. The things that are in FNAF World that have the same antenna, but they're either yellow or red or different colors, are coming from the Fredbear plush. And whenever they're using the audio and they're talking to the crying child, the frequencies are going from that walkie-talkie's antenna to the antennas inside of Cece's brain that these monsters are the misguided side effect of. These things are telling us what's going on. The Fredbear plush calms down while talking, sending the frequencies to match with the brain. And let's go over what this is, because this is also in Operation Gateway. If we look back, we can see how this static in wind and water relates to the brain. It's something called frequency following response. And what this was is they would try to line up brain waves with waves from different sounds to try to manipulate that consciousness into deeper levels of rest, to try to be able to harness a higher level of consciousness. Again, it was referred to before as biopsychokinesis. Before we get into this and what I believe the steps are for how God David worked, I want to go ahead and take a look at this section from Man in Room 1280, where Nurse Ackerman is talking to Father Blythe and tells him about how frontal lobe damage can scramble the brain's frequencies, these signals, in other words. A signal is the same thing as a frequency. And whenever this happens, it makes the brain more susceptible to be manipulated, to be messed with. And with that being said, let's go ahead and look at 1983. Amongst this time, the crying child is being primed, just like Marilyn Schlitz's experiment. He gets upset, the Fredbear plush calms him down, talking to him and sending audio frequencies into his brain. Until he's finally primed enough, the bite of 83 happens. Whenever the bite of 83 happens, the frontal lobe is damaged, and just like it says in Man in Room 1280, the brain signals are scrambled to where they're susceptible to interference. From here, the Fredbear plush with the receiver, the walkie-talkie, keeps sending these audio signals into the crying child's brain while he's in a coma. Whenever the antenna from the walkie-talkie sends the frequencies, those frequencies are picked up by the antenna and by the antenna of the new monsters in FNAF World. Those memories, David's memories from Secret of the Mimic, are being placed inside of crying child's brain. It's putting David into the crying child. Now you may say, but this isn't how it worked for Gregory. Well, let's go ahead and look at Help Wanted 2 and Security Breach and figure out what happened and why is it different. If you look at what happened in Help Wanted 2 with the memory puzzle game, these are the same things as putting in the memory interference, except it's grown with time. Just like in the past, whenever we had floppy disks that could measure 128 bytes, going to the future and today, where we have things with multiple terabytes of space in one object, the technology for this consciousness swap also evolved. Let's go ahead and do a final recap so we're all on the same page. The CIA worked with the Mind Science Foundation. The Mind Science Foundation was led by 3 people during this period of time. It's going to be William Broad, Marilyn Schlitz, and Helmut Schmidt. These 3 parapsychologists are scattered all throughout the series, through the games, the potential military scripts, and even the books. From here, we get to the locations such as Hurricane and Cedar City, and we're being told the Bowl, which is the area where the CIA did these experiments, and multiple other ones having to do with the brain function. These parapsychologists working on Operation Gateway were to show the biopsychokinesis that the effects in Operation Gateway are actually the effects of agony in beings that we see in FNAF. So we are getting this whole big connection, this bigger story, these explanations and answers for everything we haven't had explanations and answers for before. And these steps of Operation Gateway even includes the direct pattern of transferring consciousness through frequencies using noise, just like what happened when Edward found Fiona, just like what happened with the Fredbear receiver putting memories into Cece's brain. This is what we're seeing. Operation Gateway, in my honest opinion, I absolutely fully believe this. I genuinely believe this. Operation Gateway is the basis for FNAF. If you liked what you've seen, please leave a comment, like, subscribe. Please go into the comments, right? Like, I want to argue with you guys. Like, tell me what you think. Find some kind of evidence. that contradicts this. Because here's the thing, there's not really any. I know that's weird to say because it's not like they're just going out outright denouncing the CIA, and that's a fair point. But there's more evidence for it. If you're to take out direct confirmations of things like the MCI or William Afton's name, there's more evidence showing the CIA and Operation Gateway than the MCI, the DCI, and William Afton. It's pretty solid. I hope you guys have a great day. Keep swimming in the ocean. Can't wait to see you again.